Hello gamers, or should I say game makers, because if you've clicked on this video I'm assuming you're looking for an introduction to Maya. Maya is an industry standard 3D modelling software. What I'm going to do in this video is take you through making your first model, something very simple, and the reason we're starting simple is because we can get more complex later on. So we're going to model a barrel, we're going to UV unwrap a barrel, we're going to texture it, hand painted textures, so please make sure that you have both Maya and Photoshop installed or your drawing software of choice, and then we're going to bring it back into Maya and render it, which is to take a final image. So we're going to go through the whole pipeline so that you can add this piece to your portfolio. Welcome to Autodesk Maya, sometimes shortened to Maya, which is a 3D modeling software. We're going to make sure that we can see our modeling tab. So Maya uses a lot of tabs and we're going to change workspaces often, but for now make sure you're in general and that you can see all of these shapes, which are called primitives. To start our barrel, we're going to start with a shape that is closest to a barrel so that we can do the least amount of work. The shape that is closest to a barrel is obviously the cylinder, so we're going to bring in the cylinder shape. We can simply bring in a shape by clicking on it and it will appear in our 3D workspace. Once we've brought in our shape, now we need to think a little bit about how to move around, and movement is done by holding the Alt key and using your mouse. So left mouse and Alt will spin around, middle mouse and Alt will pan, and right mouse, so right button on the mouse, will allow you to zoom in and out. So now we're going to think about our poly mesh. Now that we know how to move around our shape, we need to think about how to move our shape itself. So as you can see, the grid, which is technically the floor, this is the 0 point, is currently halfway through our cylinder, and we don't want that. We want our cylinder to sit on top of the ground line. I'm going to move over to the right, and in this window here I'm going to edit our shape on the y-axis. So the y-axis is the one going upwards, and I'm going to edit that by a whole number of 1. Now what that should do is allow the cylinder to move upwards onto the ground line. So in 3D computer graphics and in solid modeling, a polygon mesh is a collection of vertices, edges, and faces that define the shape. Vertices are the points. Then we go to edges. You'll see that now all of the lines on our model are being highlighted when we click them. And then we can change to faces, and as you can see, it's now highlighting the faces. Here I'm bringing up a radial menu. So a radial menu is a menu that is on screen that, as you can see, sort of goes in a circle. This menu is really handy and you need to know where this is. So if we use our right mouse button, click on the screen and open the radial menu, this is how we're going to change now from our verts, our edges, our faces. So this is how we're going to choose what we're selecting. So here I'm going to change back to verts. I'm going to look at my model from the side, and then I'm going to do what's called a box select. So click and drag to select, and by hitting W, and we're going to lift that upwards just to make our barrel a little bit taller. We don't want a small barrel, we want a tall barrel. Then we're going to go to the multi-cut tool. So this tool is very useful for adding in edges. We're also going to want to add some detail to our modeling, so we're going to need those horizontal lines added. So we're going to have a little look at 2 hotkeys that can be used while using the multi-cut tool. The first hotkey is Control, and this shows us the percentage of the shape that we're about to cut. Now if you hold just Shift, it will instantly go to 50%. Now if we hold Control and Shift at the same time, what that's going to do is allow us to see the percentage we're about to cut, but it's going to do it in whole numbers. So 10%, 20%, 30%, and so on. We would like one multi-cut the whole way around at 50%, and then we're going to make some cuts where I think metal bands should go. So obviously our barrel is made out of wood and metal, 2 different materials. So I'm going to put a band around the top at 10%, a band around the bottom at 90%, and then I'm going to want to add some bands into the middle. Now that we're happy with those cuts and we're happy with where the bands are going to go, we actually need to bring them outwards. We need to edit this shape, add a little bit of thickness to them. There's a really handy trick we can use here to select all of the bands. So we're going to go into face selection. We're going to select a face, and then we're going to double click while holding Shift on the face directly next to it in the direction that we want the selection to go. Once we've got all of our metal bands selected, we're going to want to extrude them. So Control and E for extrude, and then don't touch anything because this little pop-up is going to come up. So where it says thickness in our little pop-up box, for me I chose 0.2. You could choose whatever you wanted, and again you can still edit this as long as the pop-up box is there. So try something out, try 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, see what you're happy with. Now what I'm going to do is go into vertex mode, and I'm going to select all of the middle vertices. I'm going to hit R, which is our scale. You'll see that there's green, red, blue, and yellow squares. These run along the different axes. Now what we're going to want to do is select the yellow one, which is all axes, and scale proportionately. I'm then going to grab my middle vertices and just scale that out a tiny bit more, just so we get that really rounded barrel shape. You might want to do a little bit of tinkering here, but once you're happy with your barrel shape, once you're happy with your barrel's overall shape, then we need to make that indent at the top of the barrel. So what we're going to do is click on a face. So go into face select mode, click on a face at the top, these little triangles, and we're going to hold shift because we want to select all of those triangles at the top, and we're going to go through and select them all, and then we're going to extrude again. So we're going to go Control E to extrude. Our little pop-up menu comes up, but instead of thickness we're going to go offset. So again I'm using that same number, 0.2, and it's going to bring everything inwards towards the center. And once we have that, don't click anything. You'll see that the smaller circle is selected now. You're going to press Control E again, then you're going to hit W and push it downward. Be really careful when extruding. Sometimes you can extrude without knowing you've done it, and you can extrude on top of an extrusion on top of an extrusion, and that's going to cause you a whole load of problems later on, because what you're going to end up having is vertices on top of vertices on top of vertices, and that's going to be a real problem when we come to UV unwrap, when we come to actually editing our shape in the future, and you can't always see these things instantly. So be very careful when we're extruding. I'm going to click off of my model. I'm going to have a little look around, check that I'm happy with how this is looking, how this barrel is looking, and then I'm going to go to object select mode in the radial menu. Now we're going to hop over to a different workspace, and we're going to hop over to the UV editing workspace. So we're going to go over to the top right hand corner, and instead of being in general, we're going to go to UV. And now it's given us some different tools in that really far right hand panel. So all primitives come with UVs already. We don't need that because we've made edits to the shape already. So these UVs no longer serve us. So we're going to box select and press delete on our keyboard to get rid of them. So UVs are 2D coordinates that define how a texture is mapped onto a 3D model. They're going to tell the 3D model where to put parts of the texture. Think of them as coordinates. What we need first is a projection. I've done this through going to the top, going to UV, and going to camera-based projection. And you'll notice as I run my mouse over the 3D model, it also highlights on the UV side. We can now go into edge selection mode, and we can select the edges and where we want to cut down. So the best way, I think, is to separate things right now by what materials they're going to be. So we're going to go to this edge here where the wood meets the metal. We're going to select one edge, hold shift, and select the edge directly to the right of it. That, as we said, is going to select everything in between. And then we're going to come over to the right hand side, and you'll see in that little toolkit you've got a tool called cut. And once you hit that cut button, you will see in your right hand window in the UV editor that edge that you've selected should now go white. It should be slightly thicker, and it should go white even when it's not selected, and that shows you that a cut has been made. So there's a few cuts here that I've made. So I've made one underneath the top metal band, on the inside of the top of the metal band where the wood meets the metal, and we're going to do the same at the bottom. So we're going to cut around the bottom where the wood meets the metal, and then around the lip of it where the wood meets the metal. We're also going to do one cut directly down the middle, like a slice down the side, but only from the two circle cuts we've already made. The way that I like to explain this to my students quite often is that it's like a Terry's chocolate orange wrapper around a chocolate orange. So when you first pull out a Terry's chocolate orange, obviously the wrapper is wrapped around a spherical shape, around a circle. And when you take the wrapper off and lay it flat, it lays flat on a table. So that's all we're doing, is we're taking the wrapper
off of our 3D model, laying it flat and then drawing on top of it. So that's why we're doing this process. And then I'm pretty happy with my cuts, so now I'm going to go into object select mode to make sure that the entire object is selected, so it's gone green. And then I'm going to click unfold. Everywhere that those cuts have been made, it's going to now try and unfold. Do 2 circles and a sort of rectangle. So that's the body of the barrel and those top pieces. But unfortunately, they're lying over the top of each other. So we need to lay these out nicely. So now we're going to select all of these and we're going to go to layout. So what layout does is it tries to put them into the most optimal position. So it's going to try and fit everything into this one box. For us as texture painters, we need things to be laid out nice and straight. Because we're in our UV editor, we now get this new option to edit UV shells. So we can click on a UV shell, hit W to move it, E to rotate, or R to scale. So I'm going to move all of the circles above it so that they're all things that are similar, sort of grouped together. This is also going to help me when I'm painting because I'm going to be able to see what goes where. Then I'm going to select everything and hit layout again. I want a little bit of space between the body and those sort of circular areas, so I'm going to move them up slightly. So you'll see that I just move it about a bit. So now that we're happy with where our UVs are, there's one more little trick that I want to do to make it easier for us when we're painting. And that is that I'm going to straighten the UVs of this body. So I'm going to make sure that it's selected, the UV shell is selected, and I'm going to go to my straighten UVs. So now that we've laid out all of our coordinates, our map, let's say, we need to make sure that we can save it as an image, as a flat image. So we're going to go to our little tab here and go to image, and then we're going to go to UV snapshot. And that's going to allow us to save this as a 2D image that we can then open up in our drawing software. So we've saved that. For me, I've opened it in Photoshop. As you can see, the background is transparent. So I'm going to need to add a new layer, drag it underneath. I'm going to add a black background, and they're still not great. They're still not very thick. They're still not very contrasting. So I'm actually going to go to adjustments, levels, and I'm going to drag the white level so that I can see much clearer. This tutorial is more for getting familiar with the workflow, so I'm not going to go into too much detail of this sort of Photoshop tutorial portion of the hand painted textures. So what I'm going to do is just get us to the point where we can add in our base colors and then sort of let you go do what you need to do with your hand painted textures. So I'm going to use my selection tool to select everything, and I'm going to add a base color. So the base color is going to be a wood color. And now I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to make sure that I pick all of the metal pieces and make those a metal color. I'm going to delete this middle bit because it's not needed. We know that that is a metal circle. It's the rim. I'm going to make that gray so that I know where it is. I'm going to go around this other one. This one's a little bit trickier because remember we put the wood in the middle of it as well. And I'm going to make this entire bit gray as well. And I'm just going to go around sort of drawing. Luckily we've sort of got these straight lines that we can follow. And then this is why we straightened our UVs. It was so that we could do things like this, like a nice box select, and then drop our metal color in. And now in Photoshop or in Procreate or in whatever you're using, what we can do now is use a clipping mask. A clipping mask allows us to only draw on the thing that's underneath. So on my wood layer, I've added a clipping mask over the top, and now I'm going to draw in some shadows. So for me, I like to use a purple for my shadows, and then I change that layer to a multiply layer and I lower the opacity. This is going to give the illusion of a shadow. I'm going to do that to the inside of this as well, because we know that this is sort of indented. Change the whole of the base of the barrel to a darker color because we know that that's underneath and the light wouldn't get it. And then I'm going to add another clipping mask, another layer, and I'm going to do all of my highlights. I do this in a cool white, so I know that this is the edge of the top of the barrel, and I think this is where the light would hit. So I've added in a little edge highlight, a little rim highlight, and I'm going to make this layer a screen layer and lower the opacity. I'm also going to add an edge light to the top of the metal that goes around the barrel. Add a little shadow back in to go under here and a little bit at the bottom. Now if it were me, one of the things I would do is come in and paint in all of my wood texture, add some texture to the metal. I'm going to hand paint my textures off camera, but for now I've sort of gone off, painted my wood, painted my metal, given it a bit of texture. Again, keeping it quite simple, quite what we call stylized. We're going to go back into Maya. We're going to go into our radial menu and we're going to go down to assign a new material. We are then going to go to Lambert. That's the type of material that we're going to make. And where it says color on the right hand side, we're going to go to that little checker black and white box at the end there, and we're going to click file. So we're going to attach a file as the color instead of picking a color. And because this has a UV map added to it, it knows exactly where to put those textures. They should appear on your barrel. If they don't appear, it might be because you're in the wrong view mode. Try hitting 6 on your keyboard and see what happens. So now we have a barrel, it's got some texture on it. You can see our fake shadow that we've painted in. You can see our highlights going around the top of the metal. You can see that the underneath is a little bit darker because we gave that a shadow. And so we faked all of that information. The next thing we need to do is take a render. So Maya has an inbuilt ray tracing renderer called Arnold. It should be there for you already, but if you're not seeing the Arnold tab, what you can do is go to Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and you can search MTOA, and then you can make sure that it's loaded. You should have a Arnold tab that you can click on. So what we're going to do first is bring in some lights, because we need lights to be able to see our image. I'm going to bring in an area light, which is this big square light, and the direction that this line is going, this sort of tail on our light, is the direction that the light is pointing. So it makes it really easy for you to know where to point the light. We're going to use W and move this light around. I'm going to have it facing downwards. I'm going to have a top light right now. So what I need to do is I need to rotate it. So I click E and I rotate it to face downwards. Then I'm going to move it upwards, and I want it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm also going to scale it outwards using R and then using the yellow scaler, which is the uniform scaler. Now, right now my light's not very strong. So I'm actually going to go over here into the intensity, and I'm going to change that to 200. Then if I go back up to the top to my play button, you'll see this like play. That's going to start a render. And what we can do is see a preview of that render. So as you can see, there's a white light facing my barrel. So I'm going to need to add in some more lights. What we can do now that we've got the settings and the strength, the intensity that we like, we can actually click Control D. This is going to Control duplicate our light. I can then move my duplicate out, rotate it a little bit, and now I have a second light. I'm going to bring that to the side. I'm going to have a little look from the top, so Alt and left mouse to move around. I'm going to put it on a bit of an angle, bring it towards the camera. I'm going to need one on the other side, so I'm going to click Control D to duplicate, flip it the other way, and now I've got 3-point lighting. This is very common in photography studios. It's a common film practice to have 3 points of light. Now I'm going to move my camera back to the front because the render is always taken from where your camera is facing. I'm going to hit my play button and it's going to start a new render. So we can see that that render is well lit. I want to move my barrel a little bit. I want to see a little bit more of the rim, and then I'm going to start my render again. And this bit down the bottom, this like bar, is going to show you how far through your render is. And now my render's finished. It's pretty nice. I'm going to save it. So this is going to save as a readable image. Save it where you like, and now you have your render.
Although basic, I hope that was a good introduction into Maya. You might be thinking to yourself, that was a pretty basic tutorial, I only learned how to make a barrel, but hopefully you've seen the whole workflow, the whole process, the modeling, the texturing, the rendering, and now you feel a little bit more confident in the software and we can get a little bit more advanced next time. If you feel like it, have a look in the description down below for my socials, and feel free to send me the images of your barrels. I can't wait to see what you've made. Thanks so much for watching.